Yeah, I think that something that you mentioned a couple other times, which has made these conversations so difficult, is it seems like people on the left don't really care anymore about whether or not there is like the fact of the matter if a person is trans or not. But a lot of the conversation has kind of shifted over to this self-ID thing, which is, it is, I was going to say in my opinion, but it's not about it. It's a totally incoherent and ridiculous position that you can like ID as a thing and then you are that thing. Like that wouldn't work for any other category ever in the history of anything ever. You can't just ID as a thing and be a thing. The example that people always give as a counter to this is always like, what about your name? Your name can be whatever you want to be. It's like, yeah, but that's your name. The name is supposed to be whatever you want it to be, but no other category of thing works that way. I think that when you've pushed self-ID a lot, then what happens is of course you can't like challenge somebody on whether or not they are trans because the qualifications for them being trans are them saying that they're trans, even though really that's not the case. Like if I ID right now as trans, that doesn't make me trans. Like the underlying fact of the matter is I'm not, or at least I don't think I am. So yeah, I think yeah, to give the argument on the other side though, because I am sympathetic towards it, is it probably feels like for a long time, if you are trans, that a lot of the people that are putting up those roadblocks in front of you to be like, we just got to be sure, they're not really trying to put up roadblocks to make sure you are trans. They just don't believe in it at all. And they're trying to make the process as confusing or difficult or as impossible as they can in order to prevent anybody from taking that treatment. So I can understand where the push from the left comes from to make it more accepting as well. Kind of like when you go to like some like abortion clinics, I think some states try to say that like they have to show you like a picture of like the fetus before you have an abortion, which whether or not you're pro or anti-abortion, like obviously the goal is to try to like make it as difficult as possible for you to actually go through with it, you know?
I remember this was sort of my first hint that the trans shit had in many ways become a cult. Was right before I started my medical transition, I sought out like a support group or whatever. It was like the one in my city, and it was I think it was like corporatized as well. Like it was like one of these bigger like Stonewall, like something. There's like 20 other trans people in there, and they're all sitting at a round table, and they start talking about how we really shouldn't be using terms like trans woman or trans man anymore, that it should be trans masculine and trans feminine. And you had all these people who had no intention of ever like medically transitioning.
Yeah.
And it's like, to me, that reeks of like, there are fakers with like any mental health condition, any health condition in general. But for whatever reason, the fakers are like defended within the trans shit and by like leftists. I don't really understand that. You know, I did like a whole segment, and I've been getting like fucking eaten alive on Twitter. Well, not eaten alive because I'm still here. On Twitter about it, I was talking about how trans trenders have like destroyed the credibility of trans people, which is this concept of like, you know, objective self-ID, and like trans masculine is as valid as a trans man. And it's like, that to me is some fake shit. That to me is you trying to gain like the social capital of saying I'm trans, but you're not actually transitioning. And so the issue arises when like no one can say that. And then people just feel like they have to just like throw everything out with it. So then it's like, okay, then fuck all trans people. Like I so get the fuck all trans people perspective, and that can sound like messed up or whatever. But I genuinely think if I wasn't trans, I'd be like, fuck all trans people. I'm so done with this because it doesn't make any sense anymore.
Yeah. I had a big trans arc, I guess, on my stream like a year and a half ago, where I was doing a lot of trans debates, a lot of trans discourse. And I, you know, every now and then, if depending on what I'm talking about, I'll solicit from my audience, like, listen, if you're trans, if you're Black, if you're a woman, whatever, like email me, like if I'm trying to get experiences, because I don't have these experiences, so I can't know. So yeah, at one point I was like, listen, if you're trans, email me, tell me what it's like, what, you know, what's going on, what am I missing, what am I not missing? And that experience that you just gave, it seems to be really common today, where when you get, I'll call them actual trans people that have dysphoria, they're trying to transition, especially on college campuses, when they join support groups to try to figure out like, okay, well, you know, where do I go for medication? What do I want to do? Like 95% of the people are like non-binary women that like go by Z's or pronouns. They've got septum piercings, they've got dyed hair, and maybe they wear binders, maybe. But that's all they ever want to do. That's the extent of the transition ever. And then all the conversations are just about like communism and like social issues. And it's like, if you're an actual trans person with dysphoria and you're trying to transition and you're looking to do that, those places, I don't know if they exist for you anymore. Like, as funny as much as people complain about like trans people destroying women's spaces, like the new trans trenders, it feels like have like legitimately destroyed trans spaces. Because holy fuck, even if you are trans, there's no possible way that you could open like a trans space, be like, okay, guys, this is for trans people, no non-binaries and no people that aren't looking like, you would get eviscerated by doing that. Yeah, and then like you said, it's become really hard then for those people, because now, and this happens to me a lot too, because I think my positions on trans stuff are pretty reasonable, even if I disagree with some people, even if we have some disagreement, I think they're pretty reasonable. But every time I go to argue, I almost feel like I'm being disingenuous, because anytime I give trans arguments, I know that the person I'm talking to has never heard these before. If you argue against me and I'm saying things like, I think some people are trans, they probably need healthcare, we need to figure it out. What they're used to hearing is self-ID is real. Any impairment whatsoever to trans healthcare is bigoted. And you have to accept all of these people as their identities. Even in private, you got to do blah, 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 blah. Otherwise, you're a huge bigot. And this is the argument they've heard 99% of the time. So when I come and I wheel out my arguments, like, I know I can be persuasive, but at the end of the day, the other person probably doesn't feel like I'm being genuine. And I don't even blame them, because it's like, I'm probably one of like 12 people that would even say these things, because everybody else wants relentless affirmation, relentless care, relentless transition for children. And it's like, yeah. And then kind of what you said, there's like this broader problem where, I've said this a lot, and I will continue to say this. Kids being radical in school is a good thing. Everybody is radical in school. Everybody who's 18 to 20, all the Vietnam protesters, I was, I'm sure you were, every motherfucker when they're 18, 19, 20 has some crazy shit that they believe.
I was a purple-haired vegan in high school.
Okay, cool. I supported fucking Ron Paul. I was a ride or die Ron Paul fan in college, right?
Were you really?
Yeah, absolutely. Hell yeah. Abolish the Fed 2008. We watched him on TV when he won like one state, and we were like, this is it. He's going to do it. But yeah, so everybody's radical in school. That's nothing to be alarmed about, that kids are being radical. Kids are always radical. The problem now, though, is the aesthetic and the radicalness of kids. It used to be something where it's like, okay, we get it. You're goth, you're seen, you're a libertarian, whatever. You'll grow out of it, you're whatever. But you can't say that anymore, because now it's all about trans. And like the identity is unassailable. You can't say anything bad about it. You can't say, okay, you'll probably grow out of this, or you'll figure this or whatever, because now it's like, okay, hold on. Whoa. Like, you might have said that kid was goth and he'll grow out of it. I'm not goth now. I'm trans. I'm an NB mask presenting lesbian femme with a huge dick or whatever. And it's like, okay. Yeah, sorry, I'm really, yeah. Oh God, everything is like so, it's so annoying. Yeah.
And here's the thing, it's like, there are studies that show, and this is, whenever you get into studies about trans shit, this is also like a huge source of frustration for me, because it is so hard to find valid numbers on trans shit. And then like on a personal level, that sucks, because like I would like to know more about like my life and my health and all this shit. But every study that comes out is always so ideologically driven. But there have been a handful of studies on like long-term follow-up on children who have gender dysphoria, and the numbers are all over the place, but it ranges somewhere between 60 and 90% growing out of it after they go through like the main stages of puberty. So that to me informs my opinion that children should not be transitioning, because I can't imagine anything worse than literally, like in some cases, having your genitals removed, you know, over something that would have dissipated on its own, right?
Or even having like top surgery as a woman, like getting your breast removed. That's pretty traumatic, like, if you end up,
then you can't feed your child, or you can't have a child in general, like for real. And then like, to me, that also, this is why, you know, I do have like leftists in my audience, and they want me so hard to drop my stance on anti-children transitioning. But it's like, for me, that stance also secures the rights of trans adults.